Blood trickled down Jamal Washington's face as the courtroom erupted in chaos. The decorated Navy SEAL commander stood unflinching, while Officer Blackwell's fist remained suspended in air. Nobody moved. Then the doors burst open, revealing dozen armed military police with laser sights dancing across the shocked officer's chest. Before we dive into this shocking story of justice and corruption, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe in accountability for everyone, no matter their badge or position, and subscribe to join our community fighting for truth. Now let's rewind to see how this explosive courtroom confrontation began and the shocking conspiracy one brave Navy SEAL uncovered in his hometown. Commander Jamal Washington stepped off the bus in Riverdale with mixed emotions. The small town where he grew up hadn't changed much in the 15 years since he left to join the Navy. At 38, Jamal had built an illustrious military career that included multiple combat tours, leadership of elite SEAL teams, and a chest full of medals, including the Silver Star for valor in Afghanistan. His 6'2" frame carried the disciplined muscle of a career special operator, and his close-cropped hair showed touches of gray at the temples that spoke to the stress of his profession. The death of his father last month had brought him back to help his aging mother, Margaret Washington, manage the family home and settle affairs. Jamal breathed in the familiar scent of magnolia trees as he walked the 6 blocks from the station to his childhood neighborhood. The modest houses of Pinecrest Avenue stood in neat rows, their lawns meticulously maintained, just as he remembered. Several neighbors waved or nodded in recognition, though many faces were new to him. Jamal planned to spend 2 weeks of his hard-earned leave helping his mother before returning to his unit in Virginia. What he didn't plan for was his encounter with Sergeant Brian Reynolds. The 45-year-old police officer had patrolled Riverdale for 20 years, building a reputation among the white residents as a tough but fair lawman who kept the peace. Among black residents, however, his name inspired fear and resentment. Reynolds sat in his patrol car at the corner of Maple and Pine, watching as Jamal jogged past in gray Navy sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt. Despite the morning humidity already soaking through his clothes, Jamal maintained the disciplined pace ingrained through years of military training. Reynolds put his coffee down and started the engine. The patrol car rolled alongside Jamal for half a block before the officer hit the siren. Jamal slowed to a stop, hands visible at his sides. Body language non-threatening but dignified. He'd been warned by childhood friends about increased police harassment in the area, but hadn't expected to experience it on his first morning back. Reynolds stepped out, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "You're not from around here," the officer stated, eyes narrowing as he looked Jamal up and down. His tone made it clear this wasn't a question. "Actually, sir, I grew up here. Just back visiting my mother on Pinecrest." Jamal kept his voice respectful, but firm. "We've had break-ins in this neighborhood." "What's the address?" Reynolds demanded, stepping closer. Jamal provided his mother's address and reached slowly toward his pocket. "I have ID right here, sir." Reynolds' hand tightened on his weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he barked, suddenly aggressive. "Turn around, hands on the wall." Jamal complied, military discipline overriding his instinct to protest. "Sir, I'm just out for a morning run. I'm an active-duty Navy." "Shut up." Reynolds cut him off, roughly kicking Jamal's legs farther apart and patting him down with unnecessary force. "You fit the description of a suspect." Several residents reported a suspicious black male in the area. From her front porch across the street, 70-year-old Mrs. Patricia Patterson watched with growing concern. The retired schoolteacher had taught Jamal in 3rd grade and recognized him immediately. She pulled out her phone and began recording as Reynolds became increasingly aggressive despite Jamal's calm compliance. "Officer, that's Margaret Washington's son," Mrs. Patterson called out. "He's a Navy officer. I've known him since he was a child." Reynolds ignored her, speaking into his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at Maple and Pine. Got a possible suspect resisting compliance." Jamal remained still, facing the wall. "Sir, I'm not resisting. I'm complying with all your commands." Reynolds responded by roughly twisting Jamal's arm and slapping handcuffs around his wrists. "You were seen casing houses in this neighborhood. We're going to the station to sort this out." Mrs. Patterson approached despite Reynolds warning her to stay back. "This is ridiculous, Brian Reynolds. I'm calling the chief right now." Several other neighbors had gathered phones recording the escalating situation. Reynolds pushed Jamal toward the patrol car with unnecessary force. As Jamal was placed in the back seat, he saw Mrs. Patterson arguing furiously with another officer who had arrived as backup. At the police station, Reynolds led Jamal to an interrogation room, the handcuffs biting into his wrists. Once inside with no cameras present, Reynolds smirked. "You people never learn, do you? Thinking you can come into decent neighborhoods." Jamal maintained his composure. "Officer, I've identified myself and my reason for being in the neighborhood. I'd like to make a phone call to my commanding officer and to legal representation." Reynolds laughed. "Sure, Navy man. Right after we discuss what I found in your pocket during the search." With practiced sleight of hand, Reynolds produced a small bag containing white powder. Jamal's eyes widened. "That's not mine. You didn't find that on me." "Funny how you all say that," Reynolds replied, placing the bag on the table between them. "Possession with intent to distribute looks bad for anyone. But for military personnel, career-ending." Jamal understood immediately what was happening, but maintained his disciplined calm. "I'm requesting a lawyer immediately, and notification of my chain of command. I'm an active-duty Navy SEAL commander, and this is a manufactured charge." Reynolds' expression flickered with momentary surprise at Jamal's rank before hardening again. "Playing military dress-up doesn't impress me. You're just another dealer as far as I'm concerned." He left the room, taking the planted evidence with him. Through the two-way mirror, District Attorney William Hayes watched with interest. At 52, Hayes had built his career on being tough on crime, which in practice meant pursuing maximum charges against black defendants while offering generous plea deals to white ones. His re-election campaigns prominently featured his conviction statistics in Riverdale's predominantly black neighborhoods. Reynolds joined him in the observation room. "Got a live one here, Bill. Claims he's some kind of Navy commando." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Is he?" Reynolds shrugged. "Maybe. Doesn't matter. Found enough product on him to put him away for 5 to 7. He was casing houses in Lakeview." Hayes nodded slowly. "Military angle could be problematic." "What's your read?" Reynolds leaned against the wall. "Arrogant. Thinks his service puts him above the law. Probably dealing to fund a habit. These military types come back with all kinds of problems." Hayes made his decision. "Charge him with possession with intent. Set bail high. If he really is military, we can always offer a plea later to avoid complications." What neither man knew was that Mrs. Patterson had already made several calls. The first to Jamal's mother, the second to her grandson Kevin, who worked in cybersecurity, and the third to an old friend who served on the city council. Within hours, what Reynolds and Hayes thought would be a routine case was about to become anything but. Aisha Coleman shuffled through the stack of case files that had been unceremoniously dropped on her desk that morning. As a public defender in Riverdale for the past 7 years, she was accustomed to overwhelming caseloads and clients who often received justice proportional to their bank accounts. At 35, Aisha had developed a reputation for fierce advocacy despite the system's constraints. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and dark circles under her eyes testified to the 60-hour weeks she routinely worked. When she reached Jamal Washington's file, something made her pause. The charge seemed straightforward enough: possession with intent to distribute, but the defendant's background was anything but typical. Commander, Naval Special Warfare. Silver Star recipient. 15 years of decorated service. Multiple advanced degrees. No criminal record whatsoever. Aisha frowned, flipping through the arrest report. The inconsistencies were glaring. The officer's narrative described a belligerent suspect, while witness statements painted a completely different picture. She checked her watch. The arraignment was scheduled for 2 hours from now. Grabbing her coat, Aisha headed to the county jail for her initial client meeting. The small interview room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale air. When guards brought Jamal in, Aisha was struck by his composed demeanor despite 24 hours in custody. He sat straight-backed in the orange jumpsuit, hands folded on the table. "Commander Washington, I'm Aisha Coleman, your court-appointed attorney." She extended her hand, which he shook firmly. "Miss Coleman, thank you for coming. I assume you've reviewed the charges against me." His voice was calm and measured. Aisha nodded. "I have, and frankly, they don't add up. I'd like to hear your version of events." Over the next 40 minutes, Jamal provided a detailed chronological account of his encounter with Sergeant Reynolds. His recall was precise, noting exact times, locations, and verbatim conversations. Aisha took copious notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Have you been able to contact your commanding officer?" she asked. Jamal shook his head. "They've denied my requests for a phone call. Officer Reynolds confiscated my cell phone, which contained all my military contacts." Aisha made another note. "That's a violation of your rights. I'll address it immediately. For now, tell me more about your military background." Jamal briefly described his career path from Naval Academy graduate to SEAL team leader. At 22, he had excelled in the brutally demanding basic underwater demolition, SEAL BUD, S training where the dropout rate typically exceeded 70%. He deployed to conflict zones across the globe, leading classified operations that he could reference only in the vaguest terms. What struck Aisha most was his disciplined approach to the current situation, analyzing his legal predicament with the same methodical thoroughness he might apply to a military objective. "Officer Reynolds has a history in this community," Aisha said carefully. "Have you had any previous interactions with him?" Jamal shook his head. "No, but several childhood friends warned me about increased police harassment in my old neighborhood. It's part of why I always run with ID, even in my hometown." After the interview, Aisha rushed back to her office and began pulling every public record she could find on Sergeant Brian Reynolds. The pattern that emerged was disturbing but not surprising. Over his 20-year career, Reynolds had accumulated 27 formal complaints for excessive force, false arrest, and intimidation. 23 of those complaints came from black residents. None had resulted in disciplinary action. More troubling were the drug cases Reynolds had built, disproportionately targeting black defendants, with remarkably similar patterns: the discovery of drugs during routine stops, often without warrant, and frequently contradicted by witness to accounts. Before heading to court, Aisha placed a call to a contact in the police department's internal affairs division. "Marcus, it's Aisha. I need anything you can give me on Brian Reynolds." Off the record. Detective Marcus Rodriguez sighed heavily on the other end. "Aisha, you know I can't discuss ongoing investigations." The word ongoing caused Aisha to sit up straighter. "So there is an investigation." Silence then. "I didn't say that. But hypothetically, if someone were building a case over several years, they wouldn't appreciate a defense attorney making waves that might spook the subject." Aisha understood the message. Hypothetically, would this person be interested in a case that perfectly demonstrates the subject's pattern of behavior? Another pause. Such a person might be very interested in receiving any evidence through proper channels, particularly if it involved a high-profile victim who could withstand character assassination attempts. The arraignment took place in courtroom 3B, presided over by Judge Harold Montgomery. At 62, Montgomery had spent 2 decades on the bench, developing a reputation for harsh sentences and unwavering faith in police testimony. His thinning white hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him a scholarly appearance that belied his rigid approach to criminal proceedings. Aisha noticed District Attorney Hayes had chosen to handle the arraignment personally unusual for what should have been a routine drug case. That confirmed her suspicion that they recognized the potential complications of prosecuting a decorated military officer. Judge Montgomery peered over his glasses as Jamal was led in still in handcuffs, despite courthouse protocol allowing their removal during proceedings. Case number 2-034-78. State versus Washington, charge of possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance. Hayes approached the podium. "Your Honor, given the serious nature of the offense and the defendant's lack of community ties, the state requests bail be set at $200,000. Aisha stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. Commander Washington has no criminal record. He's a decorated Navy SEAL, with 15 years of military service, including a Silver Star. He's in Riverdale temporarily to assist his widowed mother following his father's death. Furthermore, the circumstances of his arrest show clear procedural violations and evidence inconsistencies that call the entire case into question." Judge Montgomery frowned. "Miss Coleman, save your trial arguments for trial. This is an arraignment. Your Honor, I have witness statements contradicting the arresting officer's report, including from a respected retired educator who has known my client since childhood. Additionally, Commander Washington was denied his right to contact his military command, a clear violation of procedure. From the gallery, Mrs. Patterson nodded emphatically. She sat beside Margaret Washington, Jamal's mother, whose dignified bearing matched her son's despite the obvious distress in her eyes. Judge Montgomery seemed unmoved. The defendant's military status doesn't place him above the law, Miss Coleman. However, in light of his service, record bail is set at $100,000. Next case. As Jamal was led away, Aisha quickly informed him that she would contact his mother about bail arrangements. In the hallway after the hearing, Officer Reynolds approached Aisha with a smirk. "Nice try, counselor, but your seal is just another dealer as far as this court is concerned." Aisha met his gaze coolly. "Interesting choice of words, Sergeant. Just another dealer implies a pattern. I'll be sure to explore that pattern thoroughly during discovery." Reynolds' smirk faltered momentarily before he recovered. "Good luck with that. Judges in this county know who keeps their streets safe." As Reynolds walked away, Mrs. Patterson approached Aisha. "Miss Coleman, I have something you should see. My grandson helped me retrieve it this morning." She held out her phone, displaying a video. "This is from my neighbor's security camera across the street. It shows the entire incident, including what happened before your client was handcuffed." Aisha watched the footage carefully, her expression hardening when she saw Reynolds clearly reaching into his own pocket before finding something on Jamal. "Mrs. Patterson, I need a copy of this immediately. And please don't share this with anyone else yet." That evening, Reynolds met with 3 other officers at a bar on the outskirts of town. The dimly lit establishment was known as an unofficial police hangout where conversations wouldn't be overheard by the wrong ears. "The Washington case might get complicated," Reynolds told officers Daniels, Moore, and Sullivan. "Guy's some kind of military hotshot." Officer Daniels sipped his beer. "Military angle could bring unwanted attention. Maybe we should kick it down to a simple possession, let him plead to time served." Reynolds shook his head. "No way. These military types think their service makes them special. Besides, Hayes is on board for the full charge." Officer Sullivan leaned forward. "What about witnesses? That old lady teacher was running her mouth at the scene. Patterson, nobody takes her seriously. Montgomery certainly won't. Just stick to the script we've been using. Suspicious behavior, furtive movements, reasonable suspicion leading to discovery. Same as always." What Reynolds didn't know was that his dismissal of Mrs. Patterson would prove to be a critical miscalculation. Later that night, Aisha received an anonymous call. The voice was disguised, but the message was clear. "Drop the Washington case if you know what's good for you. Some people in this town don't appreciate outsiders causing trouble." Aisha recorded the call and added it to her growing case file. Meanwhile, in a secure facility hundreds of miles away, Commander David Chen reviewed an urgent message from a SEAL under his command. Chen's expression grew increasingly troubled as he read Jamal's situation. Within minutes, he was on a secure line to naval intelligence. "We may have a situation requiring intervention," he began. "One of our operators appears to have been targeted by local law enforcement under highly suspicious circumstances. What happens when a decorated Navy SEAL becomes the target of corrupt police? Can a single public defender stand against a system designed to protect its own?" Commander David Chen's office at Naval Special Warfare Command hummed with activity as he assembled a small team to look into Jamal Washington's situation. A 20-year veteran with extensive intelligence background, Chen had served alongside Washington in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth. He knew with absolute certainty that the drug charges were fabricated. "Jackson, I need everything on Riverdale Police Department. Focus on this, Sergeant Reynolds. Carter, get me the jurisdiction protocols for active duty personnel arrested by civilian authorities. Rodriguez, establish a secure communication channel with Washington's attorney." The 3 team members nodded and dispersed to their tasks. Chen studied the arrest report forwarded by Aisha Coleman, his expression darkening as he read. His instincts told him this wasn't an isolated incident. Back in Riverdale, Aisha had come to the same conclusion. Working late into the night at her cramped office, she spread out case files across her desk. Over the past 3 years, Reynolds had made 36 drug arrests in predominantly black neighborhoods. The similarities were striking, All involved initial stops for minor or vague infractions, followed by discoveries of drugs. All defendants were black males between the ages of 18 and 40. Most had taken plea deals, lacking the resources to fight the charges. She created a map marking the locations of these arrests, revealing a clear pattern concentrated in just 3 neighborhoods, including Jamal's childhood community. When her office phone rang at 11:30 that night, Aisha expected another anonymous threat. Instead, she heard the voice of Detective Marcus Rodriguez from Internal Affairs. "Coleman, can you meet me? It's about your seal." 30 minutes later, Aisha sat across from Rodriguez in his car, parked behind an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. The 42-year-old detective had spent 7 years building a case against corrupt officers in the department, working so deeply undercover that many of his colleagues believed he'd been assigned to cold cases. "I shouldn't be doing this," Rodriguez said, handing her a thumb drive. "But your client's case might be the break we need. Reynolds isn't just a racist cop. He's the center of something much bigger." Aisha took the drive cautiously. "How big enough that I've had to report to state-level investigators? Reynolds and at least 6 other officers have been running a protection racket targeting specific neighborhoods. They confiscate drugs from actual dealers who pay them off, then plant those same drugs on innocent civilians to pad their statistics and justify increased patrol resources in those areas, which they use to collect more payoffs," Aisha finished. Rodriguez nodded. "The drive contains case notes, only no names or sources. I can't risk exposing my investigation, but this should help you establish a pattern for your client's defense." As Rodriguez drove away, Aisha wondered what had shaped Reynolds into the corrupt officer he'd become. The answer came the next day when she received a package from Commander Chen containing Reynolds' military records. In 2000, Reynolds had applied to multiple military special operations units, including Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, and Air Force Pararescue. He'd failed the psychological screening for all of them, with evaluators noting his authoritarian tendencies and concerning racial biases. Particularly striking was his final rejection from Navy SEAL training, where the psychologist noted Reynolds' pathological resentment towards successful minority candidates. The rejection had come just weeks after Jamal Washington had been accepted into the same program. While Aisha built her case, Jamal faced growing harassment in the county jail. Despite being placed in administrative segregation for his protection, corrections officers loyal to Reynolds made his life increasingly difficult. Small food portions, forgetting to allow shower access, misplacing paperwork for his attorney. Visits. Jamal documented everything with military precision, recognizing psychological warfare when he saw it. He maintained his physical condition by doing silent workouts in his cell and used meditation techniques learned in SEAL training to manage stress. His methodical resistance only seemed to frustrate the guards further. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, he analyzed his situation like a tactical problem. Reynolds had made a critical error, targeting an individual with the training and connections to fight back effectively. The question was, why would a veteran officer take such a risk? The answer had to involve something bigger than simple racism or corruption. Outside the jail, Mrs. Patterson faced her own form of intimidation. She awoke one morning to find her car windows smashed and a crude note warning, "Mind your own business." Rather than intimidating her, the vandalism strengthened her resolve. Her grandson Kevin, a 25-year-old cybersecurity expert who had returned home to support his grandmother, installed security cameras around her property and began his own investigation into Reynolds. "Grandma, I've been analyzing the security footage from the neighbors on your street," Kevin explained as they sat at her kitchen table. 3 of them captured parts of Commander Washington's arrest. "When I combine them and enhance the audio, it's clear Reynolds never found anything on Washington. He planted the evidence." Mrs. Patterson nodded grimly. "Can you recover the footage from his cruiser camera, too?" Kevin's expression turned serious. "That's where it gets interesting. According to police records, I accessed the camera mysteriously malfunctioned during that exact time period. But the GPS tracking in the patrol car shows Reynolds made an unscheduled stop at an abandoned gas station just before encountering Washington. The same station appears in his patrol patterns before 6 other questionable arrests." Meanwhile, Aisha discovered a troubling financial connection. Public records revealed that District Attorney Hayes and Reynolds co-owned several rental properties in Riverdale, through a shell company named RH Investments. More concerning, these properties had been purchased at well below market value from defendants who had faced charges brought by Reynolds and prosecuted by Hayes. The pattern suggested a real estate scheme targeting vulnerable property owners. When Commander Chen received this information, he expanded his investigation. Naval intelligence discovered that 3 other black veterans in Riverdale had been arrested on drug charges by Reynolds or his close associates in the past 2 years. All had taken plea deals rather than fight the charges, effectively ending their military careers. Chen recognized a pattern that went beyond opportunistic corruption. This appeared to be targeted harassment of military personnel, particularly black service members. The night before a critical evidence hearing, Kevin Patterson made a breakthrough. Working through encrypted police communications, he discovered deleted footage from Reynolds' body camera. The officer had believed the deletion permanent, but Kevin's expertise in data recovery allowed him to piece together fragments of video showing Reynolds meeting with a known drug dealer minutes before stopping Jamal. In the grainy footage, Reynolds could be seen accepting a small package from the dealer. "This is it," Grandma Kevin said, his voice tense with excitement. "This proves he had the drugs before he ever encountered Commander Washington." As Mrs. Patterson watched the recovered footage, Reynolds was receiving troubling news of his own. A contact in the courthouse had informed him that Aisha Coleman had filed a motion for discovery that specifically requested body camera footage, patrol car, GPS data, and Reynolds' complete disciplinary record. More concerning, the motion mentioned witness video that contradicted his official report. Reynolds immediately called an emergency meeting with his inner circle. "We have a problem," he told officers Daniels, Moore, Sullivan, and 2 others, as they gathered in Sullivan's basement. "Coleman is digging deep and she's got the old teacher's video." Officer Moore swore under his breath. "Can we get to Patterson? Make her reconsider her statement?" Reynolds shook his head. "Too risky now. We need to make this case go away quickly. Sullivan, you've got contacts in the jail. Make Washington's life hell until he's willing to take a plea just to get out." Officer Daniels looked uncomfortable. "Brian, this is getting complicated. Military's involved now. I got word they've been asking questions down at county records about all our arrests involving veterans." Reynolds slammed his fist on the table. "We are not backing down. Hayes has too much invested in this case. If Washington walks, people will start looking at our other cases. Everything could unravel." What none of them realized was that the unraveling had already begun. Is this how justice works in our country? Should the system that's supposed to protect us be able to frame an innocent man just because of the color of his skin? Comment number 1. If you believe no one should be above the law, even police officers who abuse their power. Like and subscribe if you want to see justice served in this shocking true story. Can Jamal Washington, a decorated Navy SEAL, overcome a corrupt system determined to destroy him? And what will happen when the military discovers one of their elite operators has been targeted? Let's continue this explosive story. The Riverdale County Courthouse stood as an imposing reminder of authority, its weathered stone facade and towering columns projecting permanence and power. Inside courtroom 3B, that power was being wielded by Judge Harold Montgomery with calculated precision. Jamal Washington, still in his orange jumpsuit despite having posted bail, stood beside Aisha as the judge denied their motion for release without monitoring. Given the serious nature of the charges and potential flight risk due to the defendant's military connections, this court orders continued electronic monitoring and surrender of passport pending trial. Judge Montgomery intoned barely, glancing at the defense table. Aisha maintained her professional composure despite her frustration. "Your Honor, Commander Washington has demonstrated every intention of fighting these charges. He's surrendered his military ID, established local residence with his mother, and his commanding officer has provided written assurance that he is not scheduled for deployment. The ankle monitor creates an undue hardship and prejudicial appearance." Judge Montgomery's response was curt. "The court's ruling stands, counselor. Next matter." As they exited the courtroom, Aisha whispered to Jamal, "This isn't about flight risk. They're trying to humiliate you, break you down into taking a plea." Jamal nodded almost imperceptibly. "I recognize the tactic immediately. It's not that different from psychological operations I've studied, just with a gavel instead of a weapon." Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of District Attorney Hayes, flanked by two assistant prosecutors. His tailored suit and practiced smile projected confidence as reporters gathered in the hallway. The district attorney's office is committed to treating all defendants equally under the law, Hayes announced to the assembled microphones. Military status does not exempt anyone from accountability for drug crimes that impact our communities. We have solid evidence and witness testimony supporting the charges against Mr. Washington. Aisha stepped forward immediately. That's Commander Washington, and the only witnesses are officers working directly under Sergeant Reynolds, whose history of misconduct is well documented. My client maintains his innocence, and we have video evidence demonstrating that the alleged drugs were planted during an unlawful stop based solely on racial profiling. The reporter's attention shifted, cameras turning toward Aisha and Jamal. Hayes' smile tightened. Miss Coleman's allegations are baseless attempts to distract from her client's crimes. Sergeant Reynolds is a decorated officer with an exemplary record. The Riverdale Police Department stands firmly behind their work in keeping drugs off our streets. As if on cue, Police Chief Thomas Warren appeared at Hayes' side. The 57-year-old chief had spent his entire 35-year career in Riverdale, rising through the ranks alongside many of the officers now under his command. His silver hair and fatherly demeanor had made him a beloved figure among white residents, while many in the black community viewed his folksy charm as a cover for maintaining discriminatory policies. Sergeant Reynolds has my complete confidence, Chief Warren stated firmly. His drug interdiction work has been instrumental in addressing the narcotics problem facing our community. These unfounded accusations against one of our finest officers will not deter us from our mission. The dueling press conferences set the tone for local media coverage. The Riverdale Gazette, read primarily by the town's white residents, ran the headline, "Naval Officer Faces Drug Charges, Claims Persecution." In contrast, the community voice serving Riverdale's black neighborhoods, led with decorated black seal framed by RPD evidence, suggests corruption. The racial divide in perspectives could hardly have been more stark. That evening, Mrs. Patterson received an unexpected visit from Officer Moore. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm here as a courtesy," he began after she cautiously opened her door. "Some officers are concerned about the statement you provided regarding Commander Washington's arrest. There are worries that your memory of events might not be accurate." The 70-year-old schoolteacher drew herself up to her full 5 feet 2 inches. "My memory is excellent, Officer Moore, as are my neighbor's security cameras. I suggest you leave my property immediately, unless you have a warrant." Moore's expression hardened. "You should consider how this might affect your standing in the community. A respected teacher like yourself getting involved in drug cases, taking the word of criminals over police." Before he could continue, Kevin Patterson appeared behind his grandmother. "Officer, this conversation is being recorded for our protection. Are you here to threaten a witness in an active case?" Moore retreated quickly, but the message had been delivered. Later that night, Mrs. Patterson's front window shattered as a brick crashed into her living room. Attached was a note reading, "Race traitors burn." Kevin immediately called the police, but the responding officers were allies of Reynolds. They took minimal notes, suggested it was probably neighborhood kids, and left without collecting the brick or note as evidence. While local tensions escalated, Mayor Robert Wilson found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. The 60-year-old mayor had won 3 terms by carefully balancing the interests of Riverdale's diverse communities. His public statements supported the police department without question, but privately he had begun asking troubling questions about Reynolds' arrest record. In a closed-door meeting with Chief Warren, the mayor expressed his concerns. "Tom, this Washington case is drawing unwanted attention. Military personnel, racial allegations, videos, contradicting officer statements. These are exactly the kind of elements that bring federal oversight." Chief Warren dismissed the concerns. "Robert, you know how these defense attorneys operate. They throw allegations around hoping something sticks. Reynolds is solid." Mayor Wilson wasn't convinced. "I've seen the preliminary evidence Coleman's gathered. If even half of it holds up, we're looking at a potential consent decree and years of federal monitoring, not to mention the lawsuits." "What are you suggesting?" Warren asked coldly. "I'm suggesting we get ahead of this. Independent investigation, administrative leave for Reynolds pending outcome, and a serious look at these allegations. Warren shook his head. Absolutely not. You start throwing my officers under the bus based on accusations from criminals, and you'll lose the entire department. Think about your re-election. The implied threat wasn't subtle. The police union's endorsement had been crucial to Wilson's previous victories. At Naval Special Warfare Command, Commander Chen's investigation had uncovered a disturbing pattern. Working with JAG officers and intelligence analysts, he had identified 5 jurisdictions across 3 states where black military personnel had been targeted with suspiciously similar drug charges. In 3 of these jurisdictions, including Riverdale, the officers involved had connections to Blue Heritage, a private social media group for law enforcement that had been flagged by military intelligence for extremist content. This goes beyond local corruption. Chen briefed his superior officers. We have evidence suggesting a coordinated effort to target military personnel of color, particularly those in elite units. Commander Washington appears to have been specifically selected due to his high profile within naval special warfare. The admirals exchanged concerned glances. What's your recommendation? Commander Chen didn't hesitate. We have jurisdiction under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. I recommend we assert federal authority and move this case to military justice system immediately. Meanwhile, Jamal had begun his own counterintelligence operation from within the constraints of his bail conditions. The ankle monitor limited his movements to his mother's home and approved attorney visits, but his SEAL training had taught him to maximize limited resources. He established a secure communication channel through Kevin Patterson, using encrypted messaging to document patrol patterns around his neighborhood, identifying officers conducting surveillance and mapping their connections to Reynolds. During one of their confidential meetings, Aisha shared Rodriguez's intelligence about the protection racket. This explains why they're fighting so hard, Jamal observed. This isn't just about one bad arrest. If we expose Reynolds, their entire operation collapses. Aisha nodded. Rodriguez believes Hayes is getting a cut too, probably through their real estate deals. Property seized in drug cases gets auctioned for pennies on the dollar to their shell companies. Jamal processed this information with the analytical precision of his military training. They've made 3 critical errors. First, they chose a target with resources and training to fight back. Second, they underestimated the community's willingness to stand with me. And third, they failed to consider military jurisdiction. As predicted, Reynolds and his allies escalated their intimidation tactics. Jamal's mother found her car tires slashed. Aisha received bar complaints filed anonymously questioning her ethics. Mrs. Patterson faced a sudden tax audit. Kevin discovered attempts to hack his computers. But instead of cowering, each act of intimidation was meticulously documented, building an increasingly compelling pattern of witness tampering and obstruction. The turning point came when Kevin Patterson, working through the night, uncovered a bombshell. Digging through digital records, he discovered a deleted police whistleblower report from 5 years earlier. Officer Raymond Collins, since transferred to another state, had reported Reynolds and several others for forming an unofficial unit within the department called the Cleaners. According to Collins, this group targeted specific neighborhoods for aggressive enforcement, planted evidence when convenient, and maintained a quota system for arrests of undesirables explicitly defined along racial lines. Most damning, Collins had documented meetings between Reynolds and local drug dealers that appeared to establish a protection arrangement. The report had been buried by Internal Affairs under Chief Warren's direction, and Collins had been transferred after suspicious conduct allegations emerged. Kevin immediately provided this documentation to Aisha and Commander Chen. Within hours, Chen had located Collins in Arizona and secured his cooperation in exchange for protection. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Riverdale's power structure to its core. The sleek black government SUV rolled into Riverdale with federal plates and tinted windows, drawing curious glances as it navigated the small town's main street. Behind the wheel, NCIS Special Agent Sofia Ramirez maintained a vigilant awareness of her surroundings. At 42, Ramirez had spent 15 years investigating crimes involving Navy and Marine Corps personnel, building a reputation for thoroughness and unshakable integrity. Her assignment to the Washington case had come directly from NCIS headquarters after Commander Chen's evidence suggested a pattern of targeting military personnel. Agent Ramirez parked outside the modest law office where Aisha Coleman worked. The public defender was waiting for her case files stacked neatly on her desk. Miss Coleman, I'm Special Agent Ramirez, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Aisha shook her hand firmly. I appreciate NCIS getting involved. This case has implications far beyond one wrongful arrest. For the next 2 hours, Aisha walked Ramirez through the evidence they'd gathered from the initial arrest video to Kevin Patterson's digital forensics, revealing the department's internal communications. Ramirez took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed her sharp investigative mind. This level of coordination suggests organization beyond a few corrupt officers, Ramirez observed. Have you identified connections to any external groups? Aisha hesitated before sliding across a folder marked confidential. Kevin Patterson found these in cached social media accounts. Several officers in Reynolds' circle, including Reynolds himself, participate in private forums associated with white nationalist organizations. They're careful with their language, but the content is unmistakable. Ramirez reviewed the materials, her expression hardening. This aligns with intelligence we've gathered about targeting of minority service members. Similar patterns have emerged in 3 other jurisdictions this year alone. As Agent Ramirez established her investigation in Riverdale, Sergeant Reynolds was beginning to recognize the shifting dynamics. The arrival of federal investigators represented a threat beyond his local influence. During an urgent meeting in District Attorney Hayes' office, Reynolds couldn't hide his agitation. This is getting out of control, Bill. We've got NCIS agents interviewing witnesses, that tech kid digging through our records, and now I hear the Navy's JAG Corps is filing motions about jurisdiction. Hayes maintained his politician's composure, though the tension around his eyes betrayed his concern. Brian, you need to calm down. Acting nervous only makes you look guilty. We still control the local narrative. Reynolds paced the office. Narrative won't matter if the feds take over. They're not part of our system. They don't understand how things work here. They don't have anything concrete, Hayes insisted. It's all circumstantial suspicions from some bleeding heart public defender and an old lady with a grudge. What about the videos? Videos can be interpreted different ways. A jury will still take the word of an experienced officer over a defendant with everything to lose. What neither man knew was that Agent Ramirez had already begun building a case that went far beyond circumstantial evidence. Working with military intelligence analysts, she had established connections between officers in Reynolds' circle and similar groups in departments across 3 states. Financial records showed suspicious cash deposits in Reynolds' accounts following drug arrests. GPS data from patrol cars revealed unauthorized stops at known drug corners before random stops of innocent civilians. As the investigation expanded, Judge Montgomery found himself under increasing scrutiny. The State Judicial Review Board had received a detailed complaint documenting statistical disparities in his sentencing practices. Black defendants in his courtroom received sentences averaging 60% longer than white defendants for identical charges. The complaint included dozens of case examples, including several where Montgomery had dismissed video evidence contradicting police testimony. The timing of the complaint coming amid the Washington case was not coincidental. Commander Chen had activated his network of military legal professionals, including several who had transitioned to the Judicial Review Board. While these threads of investigation were being pulled, Jamal Washington maintained his disciplined patience. During a secure meeting with Aisha and Agent Ramirez, he provided insights that only someone with his background could offer. Reynolds exhibits classic counterinsurgency tactics, Jamal explained. Intimidating community members who support me, isolating me from potential allies, controlling the information environment through media connections. These are the same techniques used to suppress resistance in conflict zones. How would you counter such tactics? Ramirez asked. Jamal smiled slightly. By doing exactly what we're doing. Document everything. Build alternative communication channels. Identify and exploit the adversary's blind spots. And most importantly, demonstrate to community members that supporting justice is less risky than supporting corruption. Jamal's operational assessment proved accurate. As federal scrutiny intensified, cracks began appearing in Reynolds' alliance. Officer Sullivan approached Agent Ramirez requesting confidential informant status in exchange for testimony. 2 clerks from the district attorney's office provided evidence of altered police reports. A jail guard supplied recordings of Reynolds instructing staff to make Jamal's detention as difficult as possible. Meanwhile, Reynolds made a desperate attempt to salvage his case by planting a jailhouse informant. The informant, a repeat offender named Marcus Jenkins, was offered a reduced sentence to claim Jamal had confessed to drug dealing during a recreational period. What Reynolds didn't know was that Jamal had immediately identified Jenkins as an informant using counterintelligence techniques from his military training. Rather than avoiding Jenkins, Jamal fed him carefully crafted misinformation, including a false confession designed to contradict physical evidence in the case. When Jenkins repeated this misinformation to Reynolds, it became another piece of evidence demonstrating the conspiracy. As pressure mounted, Mayor Wilson faced a political calculation. With federal investigators establishing a presence in town and community protests growing supporting Reynolds and Hayes had become politically untenable. In a private meeting with Chief Warren, the mayor delivered an ultimatum. Tom, I'm establishing an independent review commission for the department. Reynolds goes on administrative leave, pending investigation, or I request state police oversight of the department. Warren's face flushed with anger. You don't have the authority. Check the city charter, Wilson replied coolly. Emergency powers during a public confidence crisis. I've already consulted with the city attorney. While the political battles unfolded, the personal cost of standing against corruption became clear. Mrs. Patterson awoke to find her home vandalized with racist graffiti. Kevin's car was deliberately sideswiped in a hit-and-run. Aisha's office received a package containing a dead rat. Each intimidation attempt was documented, photographed, and added to Agent Ramirez's growing case file. The pressure extended to Jamal's family as well. His mother, Margaret Washington, a respected nurse at Riverdale General Hospital for 30 years, suddenly found her shift schedule changed and her performance questioned. The hospital administrator, a golfing buddy of D.A. Hayes, cited budget concerns that somehow only affected Margaret's position. What the administrator hadn't counted on was the solidarity of Margaret's colleagues. When she arrived for her newly assigned overnight shift, she found 12 other nurses wearing buttons reading justice for Jamal. The hospital's attempt at intimidation had instead created new allies and public attention. The day before a crucial hearing on the evidence tampering allegations, Kevin Patterson faced the most direct threat yet. While working late at a local coffee shop, he was approached by officers Daniels and Moore. You should be more careful with your online activities, Daniels said, sliding into the booth across from Kevin. Hacking police servers is a federal offense. Kevin maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a cybersecurity consultant working on client projects. Moore leaned forward. Listen, genius. We know you've been digging through department records. That stops now, or you'll find yourself facing charges that will end your career before it starts. Kevin met their gaze steadily. Are you threatening me, officers? Just giving friendly advice, Daniels replied. Reynolds wanted us to mention he knows about your little marijuana conviction from college. Would be a shame if that became an issue for your security clearance applications. What the officers didn't realize was that Kevin had activated a recording app on his phone the moment they approached. The entire conversation was being captured and automatically uploaded to a secure server. Additionally, Agent Ramirez sat unnoticed at a corner table witnessing the entire exchange. The officer's attempt at intimidation had provided yet another piece of evidence for the conspiracy case. The next morning, Reynolds received an urgent call from Officer Sullivan. Brian, we've got a problem. The feds just arrested Daniels and Moore for witness intimidation. They're being processed by NCIS, not local. Military jurisdiction. Reynolds felt the ground shifting beneath him. His carefully constructed system of control was unraveling thread by thread. He made a desperate call to Hayes. We need to end this now. Offer Washington a deal he can't refuse. Misdemeanor time served, sealed record. Hayes hesitated. If we offer a deal this week, it looks like we know our case is garbage. Our case is garbage. Reynolds hissed. The feds are closing in. Cut him loose, and maybe they lose interest. What neither man realized was that the opportunity for deals had already passed. In a secure facility at Naval Station, Norfolk, Commander Chen presented the Washington case evidence to a panel of JAG officers and senior command. The comprehensive briefing detailed not only the false arrest but the wider conspiracy targeting minority service members. As Chen concluded, Admiral Harrison asked the critical question, "Your recommendation, Commander." Chen's response was immediate. Assert military jurisdiction immediately. The targeting of Commander Washington was not random, but part of a pattern of discrimination against military personnel. Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act and multiple federal statutes regarding hate crimes against military members, we have clear jurisdiction. The panel deliberated briefly before reaching consensus. Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. Prepare the necessary filings, and Commander, deploy your team to ensure proper execution. Within hours, military attorneys filed motions in federal court asserting jurisdiction over Washington's case. Simultaneously, Commander Chen activated a specialized unit, rarely deployed domestically, the Naval Special Warfare Protective Operations Team, comprised of SEALs with additional training in close protection and tactical law enforcement. Their mission ensured the safety of Jamal Washington and key witnesses during the transition to federal jurisdiction. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Riverdale to its foundations. The trial date loomed just 72 hours away, as national media descended on Riverdale, transforming the small town into a focal point for discussions about race, justice, and accountability in America. Satellite trucks lined the courthouse square, reporters delivered stand-ups from the police station steps, and locals found themselves being interviewed about their perspectives on the Washington case. For Sergeant Brian Reynolds, the mounting pressure manifested in physical symptoms, insomnia, frequent headaches, and a persistent twitch in his left eye. His carefully constructed world was fracturing around him, with each new development chipping away at the protective systems he'd built over 2 decades. Agent Sofia Ramirez worked methodically from a temporary office established in the federal building on the edge of town. Her wall displayed an intricate network diagram connecting Reynolds to other officers, local officials, and financial transactions. "We've got something," her financial analyst announced, sliding a folder across the desk. Reynolds and 3 other officers have been receiving regular payments through a shell company called Riverdale Security Consultants. The payments align perfectly with drug arrest patterns in specific neighborhoods. Ramirez reviewed the documents. Source of the funds. That's where it gets interesting. The money originates from accounts controlled by Thomas Jenkins. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. The same Jenkins who controls the Northeast Side drug trade. The analyst nodded. The very same. We've also identified payments to Judge Montgomery through a separate channel, a legal consulting arrangement with a firm owned by Jenkins' cousin. Ramirez immediately added this information to her case file and sent an encrypted update to Commander Chen. Meanwhile, Jamal's former SEAL teammates had begun arriving in Riverdale. They came individually in civilian clothes, taking rooms at different hotels, and establishing observation posts throughout the town. Lieutenant Marcus Jackson positioned himself in an apartment overlooking the courthouse. Chief Petty Officer Alex Rodriguez monitored the police station from a rented office across the street. 3 other team members established surveillance on Reynolds, Hayes, and Judge Montgomery. Their presence wasn't meant to be completely covert, just deniable enough to maintain operational security while sending a clear message: Jamal Washington was not alone. The psychological impact was immediate. Hayes noticed a familiar-looking man following him between home and office, never close enough to be threatening but always present. Judge Montgomery spotted someone photographing his private meeting with Reynolds at a country club outside town limits. Reynolds himself became convinced he was under constant surveillance, growing increasingly paranoid and erratic. From his grandmother's reinforced home, Kevin Patterson orchestrated a digital counteroffensive. Despite his recent intimidation by Reynolds' officers, Kevin had accelerated his efforts, working with a network of hacktivists to analyze years of departmental communications. "Grandma, I found something big," he told Mrs. Patterson as they shared a late dinner. Reynolds and his crew have been using a private messaging app to coordinate their activities. They thought it was secure, but they've been backing up messages to the department's cloud storage. Working through the night, Kevin extracted and organized hundreds of messages documenting the corruption scheme in the officers' own words. By morning, he had compiled a comprehensive digital dossier showing how Reynolds and his team selected targets, planted evidence, and covered for each other in court testimony. Most damning were messages specifically discussing Washington's case, including Reynolds writing, This SEAL thinks he's special. Time to teach these military boys they don't run our town. Kevin's work culminated in a secure website containing all the evidence set to publish automatically if anything happened to him, Jamal, or any key witnesses. He provided access credentials to Agent Ramirez Aisha and Commander Chen as insurance against interference. As the digital evidence mounted, Judge Montgomery faced his own crisis. The Judicial Review Board had accelerated its investigation into his sentencing patterns, and several former defendants were filing appeals based on evidence of bias. Montgomery's behavior on the bench became noticeably agitated, his rulings inconsistent, and his drinking reportedly increased. During a closed-door meeting with Hayes, the judge revealed his deteriorating resolve. "I can't take much more scrutiny, William. These federal people are digging through every case I've handled for 15 years. Hayes attempted to project confidence. "Harold, stay the course. Once we get past the Washington trial, things will settle down." Montgomery laughed bitterly. "You still think this case is going to trial? The evidence tampering is clear as day. If I rule against dismissal, the appeals court will overturn it in hours, and I'll look even more corrupt." "What are you suggesting?" Hayes asked cautiously. "I'm considering recusal. Health reasons." The panic in Hayes' eyes was unmistakable. "You can't do that. A new judge might grant their motion to dismiss, or worse, allow in all the evidence we've worked to exclude." Montgomery poured himself a drink, hand trembling slightly. "Then make this go away. Offer a deal, drop the charges, something. Because I won't risk my pension and reputation on Reynolds' vendetta." As this conversation occurred, Agent Ramirez received a critical piece of evidence from an unexpected source. Caroline Reynolds, the sergeant's wife of 18 years, requested a confidential meeting at a restaurant 20 miles outside Riverdale. The 43-year-old elementary school teacher appeared nervous, but determined as she slid a USB drive across the table. "I found this in Brian's home office," she explained quietly. "He's been different these past few years. Angry all the time, obsessed with his work, especially cases involving black men from certain neighborhoods." Ramirez took the drive carefully. "What made you decide to come forward, Mrs.?" Reynolds Caroline stared into her untouched coffee. "Last week I overheard him on the phone discussing ways to handle Washington and his lawyer if legal methods failed. There was something in his voice I've never heard before. That's when I realized I don't know who my husband has become." The drive contained Reynolds' personal records, detailed notes on targets, meetings with informants, and distribution of seized drugs to be used as planted evidence. Most disturbing was a folder labeled "Targets of Opportunity," containing surveillance photos of black military personnel who had visited or relocated to Riverdale over the past 3 years. Jamal's photo was prominently featured, along with notes about his routine and family connections. The evidence revealed not just corruption, but a premeditated campaign targeting specific individuals. In Washington, D.C., Commander Chen presented the accumulated evidence to the Department of Defense General Counsel and representatives from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. The 4-hour briefing detailed the pattern of targeting military personnel, the corruption within Riverdale's justice system, and the mounting evidence of civil rights violations. Given the clear targeting of service members and the documented conspiracy to violate their constitutional rights, we're requesting immediate federal intervention and transfer of jurisdiction to military courts," Chen concluded. The Justice Department representative nodded gravely. "The evidence supports intervention under multiple federal statutes. I'll have the necessary orders prepared within hours." "What about protection for the witnesses and victims?" asked the DoD counsel. Chen's response was measured but firm. "A protective detail has already been established, operating within legal parameters. However, given the escalating intimidation and potential for violence, we recommend a more visible federal presence during the transition of jurisdiction." The approvals came through at 3 a.m., authorizing Commander Chen to deploy military police to secure key personnel and evidence. Before dawn, a convoy of unmarked vehicles delivered 24 military police specialists to staging areas around Riverdale. As morning broke, Mayor Wilson received an unexpected call from the Justice Department, informing him of the imminent federal action and requesting his cooperation in maintaining public order. Faced with the prospect of a public showdown between local and federal authorities, Wilson made his decision. You'll have my full cooperation, he assured the federal officials. It's time this situation was resolved according to law. Are corrupt officers finally about to face justice? Will the military intervention be enough to protect Jamal from a system designed to destroy him? Comment number 1. If you believe the evidence against Reynolds and his co-conspirators warrants federal charges. Like and subscribe to see justice finally unfold in this shocking true story. What will happen when Reynolds realizes he's cornered with nowhere to run? And how will Jamal respond when finally face to face with the man who tried to destroy his life and career? Let's continue this explosive journey to justice. The Riverdale County Courthouse had stood for over a century, its marble columns and imposing facade designed specifically to inspire awe and submission in those who entered seeking justice. On the morning of Commonwealth v. WWW, Washington, the building was surrounded by an unprecedented security presence. Local police established barricades to manage the growing crowd of protesters, supporters, and media. Uniformed officers scanned the assembly with thinly disguised tension, aware of the national spotlight now focused on their small town. Inside courtroom 3B, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Every seat was filled with priority given to media representatives from national outlets and a small contingent of naval personnel in dress uniforms. Aisha Coleman arrived early, accompanied by a legal team that had grown to include 2 JAG officers in civilian attire and a civil rights attorney from Washington, D.C. They arranged their materials at the defense table with practiced efficiency, each document and exhibit organized for maximum strategic impact. Jamal Washington entered flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals, a precaution arranged by Agent Ramirez after the latest round of threats. Despite 2 weeks of intensifying pressure, Jamal maintained his military bearing. His dark suit impeccably tailored his expression, composed and dignified. He greeted Aisha with a nod, taking his seat at the defense table without acknowledging the stares from the gallery. The prosecution table remained conspicuously empty until 5 minutes before the scheduled start, when District Attorney Hayes hurried in with 2 assistant prosecutors. Hayes' typically confident demeanor had given way to barely concealed anxiety. His eyes darted around the courtroom, noting the unusual number of federal observers and military personnel. The side door opened to admit Sergeant Reynolds, who took a seat behind the prosecution table rather than his usual position standing by the bailiff. Reynolds had lost weight since his initial confrontation with Jamal, his uniform hanging slightly loose, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. He leaned forward to whisper urgently to Hayes, who responded with a dismissive gesture. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold Montgomery. The judge entered his robes freshly pressed, but his complexion ashen. As he took his seat, observers noted his hand trembling slightly when he reached for the water carafe. Be seated, he instructed, surveying the crowded courtroom with evident discomfort. Before we proceed with Commonwealth versus Washington, there are several motions to address. He shuffled through papers, avoiding eye contact with either legal team. The court has received a motion from the defense alleging evidence tampering and requesting dismissal. We've also received a motion from the United States Department of Justice asserting federal jurisdiction under the Service Members Civil Relief Act and multiple federal statutes. Hayes shot to his feet. Your Honor, the Commonwealth objects strenuously to any federal intervention. This is a straightforward local matter involving violations of state drug laws. Aisha rose calmly. Your Honor, the evidence clearly establishes that Commander Washington was targeted specifically because of his military status triggering federal protections. Additionally, we have documented a pattern of similar cases against military personnel, suggesting a conspiracy to violate their civil rights. Judge Montgomery dabbed perspiration from his forehead. The court is aware of these allegations. However, before ruling on jurisdiction, we must address the evidence tampering claims. He turned to Hayes. The prosecution will respond to these allegations. Hayes cleared his throat. Your Honor, the defense has presented no credible evidence of tampering. Sergeant Reynolds followed standard procedures during the arrest and evidence collection. The defense is attempting to distract from the fundamental facts of the case with baseless accusations against a decorated officer. Aisha's response was measured but forceful. Your Honor, we have submitted video evidence from 3 separate sources showing Sergeant Reynolds planting evidence on Commander Washington. We have testimony from multiple witnesses contradicting the official police report. Furthermore, we have evidence that this incident follows a pattern of similar false arrests targeting black men in specific neighborhoods. As Aisha detailed their evidence, Reynolds grew visibly agitated, repeatedly whispering to Hayes and shifting in his seat. Judge Montgomery, noting Reynolds' behavior, made an unexpected intervention. "Sergeant Reynolds, please maintain proper courtroom decorum." Reynolds straightened, his expression darkening. Judge Montgomery turned back to the attorneys. "The court has reviewed the defense's evidence and finds sufficient cause for concern regarding the integrity of the arrest and evidence collection." Hayes appeared stunned. "Your Honor, you can't possibly be giving credence to these conspiracy theories." "Mr. Hayes," the judge responded sharply, "the video evidence alone raises substantial questions about Sergeant Reynolds' conduct. The court cannot ignore direct visual evidence contradicting the official report." Reynolds's face flushed crimson. "This is outrageous." "That video has been doctored," he exclaimed, rising from his seat despite Hayes's attempt to restrain him. "Sergeant Reynolds, you will be seated or removed from my courtroom." Judge Montgomery ordered, his earlier nervousness replaced by irritation. "You are not addressing the court at this time." The judge turned back to the attorneys. "In light of the evidence presented, this court is inclined to grant the defense motion to dismiss all charges against Commander Washington." Before Hayes could object, the courtroom doors opened to admit Agent Ramirez and 2 federal marshals. They proceeded directly to the bench and presented Judge Montgomery with official documents. The judge reviewed them silently, his expression increasingly grim. After several tense moments, he addressed the court. "The court has been presented with a federal order assuming jurisdiction in this matter under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. All state charges against Commander Washington are hereby stayed pending federal review." The announcement sent murmurs through the gallery. Hayes rose again. "Your Honor, the Commonwealth has the right to challenge this jurisdictional overreach. You're welcome to file your objections through proper channels, Mr. Hayes." Montgomery replied, an edge of resignation in his voice. "However, the federal order is effective immediately." Reynolds, unable to contain himself any longer, surged to his feet. "This is a travesty. You're letting a drug dealer walk because he wears a uniform." Hayes grabbed Reynolds' arm. "Brian, for God's sake, sit down." Reynolds shook him off, his face contorted with rage. "You're all being played. Washington is no hero, he's a criminal." Using his military status as a shield, Judge Montgomery banged his gavel. "Sergeant Reynolds, you are out of order. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." Jamal remained perfectly still throughout this exchange, his expression neutralized, fixed forward. Aisha placed a cautioning hand on his arm, though it was unnecessary. Reynolds, ignoring the judge's warning, pointed accusingly at Jamal. "You think your fancy lawyer and military connections put you above the law. You're just another thug who doesn't belong in my town." The courtroom erupted in shocked exclamations. Judge Montgomery banged his gavel repeatedly. "Sergeant Reynolds, you are in contempt. Bailiff, restrain him." 2 courthouse security officers moved reluctantly toward Reynolds, their hesitation revealing their allegiance. Reynolds brushed past them, advancing toward the defense table. "You've destroyed everything I've built. Years of cleaning up this town, keeping people safe from your kind." His tirade continued, each word more explicitly racist than the last, the veneer of professional law enforcement completely abandoned. Hayes watched in horror as Reynolds publicly confirmed every allegation against him. The security officers made only token efforts to intervene, creating a dangerous situation as Reynolds approached Jamal with growing aggression. Judge Montgomery continued shouting for order as the gallery descended into chaos. Some spectators fled the courtroom while others recorded the unfolding scene on their phones. Jamal finally stood towering over the advancing officer. Even then, his demeanor remained controlled, hands visible at his sides in a non-threatening posture. "Sergeant Reynolds, I suggest you compose yourself," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying throughout the now hushed courtroom. "This isn't helping your situation." Reynolds' response was to lunge forward, swinging a wild punch that connected with Jamal's face, splitting his lip and drawing blood. Jamal stepped back but did not retaliate or lose his composure. The courtroom froze in collective shock at the assault. Reynolds stood with fist still raised momentarily, startled by his own action but quickly recovering. "See, he's resisting," he shouted, preparing to strike again. The courthouse security officers made no move to intervene, their inaction speaking volumes about the systemic corruption. Judge Montgomery repeatedly banged his gavel, calling for the arrest of Reynolds, but his orders went unheeded by the security staff. In that suspended moment, with Reynolds poised to attack again and Jamal standing his ground without retaliation, the main courtroom doors burst open with a thunderous crash. The sound broke the trance that had gripped the room, all eyes turning to witness the entrance of a dozen military police in full tactical gear, laser sights from their weapons creating a constellation of red dots centered on Reynolds' chest. The military police moved with practiced precision, securing the courtroom with methodical efficiency. Their commanding officer, Major Lisa Rodriguez, stepped forward, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Federal agents, everyone remain where you are." The red dots from laser sights remained fixed on Reynolds as two MPs approached him with tactical focus. "Sergeant Brian Reynolds, lower your hands slowly and step back from Commander Washington." Reynolds stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the dramatic shift in power dynamics. For 20 years he had operated with impunity in Riverdale, his badge, an unquestioned symbol of authority. Now he found himself targeted, outnumbered, and exposed. His hand trembled as he slowly lowered it. Behind Major Rodriguez came Commander David Chen, in his dress blues, accompanied by Agent Ramirez and a team of federal marshals. Chen surveyed the scene with calm authority before addressing the court. "Your Honor, I am Commander David Chen, United States Navy. By federal order, this case now falls under military jurisdiction due to the targeted harassment of active-duty military personnel. These military police are here to secure the defendant and key witnesses." Judge Montgomery, visibly relieved by the intervention, nodded. "The court recognizes federal authority in this matter. Proceedings under state jurisdiction are hereby suspended." Reynolds, recovering from his initial shock, found his voice. "You can't do this. This is my jurisdiction." Major Rodriguez approached him directly. "Sergeant Reynolds, you are being detained under federal authority for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, assault of military personnel, and conspiracy against rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the MPs secured Reynolds in handcuffs, Agent Ramirez addressed the courthouse security staff, whose inaction had allowed the assault. "All courthouse security personnel are temporarily relieved of duty pending investigation into failure to intervene in an assault committed in their presence." The officers looked to Judge Montgomery for support but found none. Major Rodriguez continued securing the scene, directing MPs to specific positions throughout the courtroom. "Judge Montgomery, you are being served with notice of suspension pending investigation by the Judicial Conduct Committee. Federal marshals will escort you from the building following these proceedings." The judge paled but offered no resistance, seemingly resigned to his fate. District Attorney Hayes attempted to slip toward the exit but found his path blocked by federal marshals. "William Hayes, you are being detained for questioning regarding conspiracy against rights, obstruction of justice, and misuse of office. Please surrender any electronic devices in your possession." Aisha watched the systematic dismantling of Riverdale's corrupt power structure with professional satisfaction. For years she had fought against this system, accumulating small victories while watching the larger pattern of injustice continue unabated. Now, in a single morning, the entire framework was being exposed and dismantled. Commander Chen approached Jamal, who remained standing calmly despite the blood trickling from his split lip. "Commander Washington, are you all right?" Jamal nodded. "Nothing serious, sir. Thank you for the timely intervention." Chen surveyed the courtroom, now controlled by federal and military personnel. "Your case helped uncover a pattern of targeted harassment against service members across multiple jurisdictions. The evidence you and your team gathered has been instrumental in building a federal case." As Reynolds was led away, he shouted over his shoulder, "This isn't over, Washington. You think you've won, but this town knows what you really are." Major Rodriguez tightened her grip on Reynolds' arm. "That's enough, Sergeant. You're only making your situation worse." From the gallery, Mrs. Patterson watched with quiet satisfaction. After decades of witnessing the systemic mistreatment of black residents by Reynolds and his associates, the scales of justice had finally tipped. Beside her, Kevin maintained a digital record of the proceedings, documenting the historic intervention. Commander Chen turned to address the court. With the permission of the federal authorities, I would like to present evidence regarding the larger conspiracy that has been uncovered. Agent Ramirez nodded her assent, and Chen proceeded to the evidence table. Using the courtroom's display system, he presented a comprehensive overview of the investigation findings. Our investigation has uncovered a systematic effort to target minority service members in multiple jurisdictions. In Riverdale alone, we have identified 7 cases where black military personnel were falsely arrested on fabricated drug charges over the past 3 years. The presentation continued with documented evidence of the protection racket operated by Reynolds and his team, including financial records showing payments from drug dealers in exchange for targeting their competition. Maps displayed the calculated pattern of enforcement concentrated in specific neighborhoods while leaving others conspicuously untouched. Furthermore, Chen continued, we have evidence linking Judge Montgomery to a pattern of judicial bias in these cases. He displayed statistics showing dramatic sentencing disparities based on race, along with documentation of Montgomery's financial connections to Reynolds through various shell companies. The evidence against District Attorney Hayes was equally damning. Financial records revealed property acquisitions from defendants he had prosecuted purchased at fractions of market value through shell companies. Text messages showed coordination with Reynolds to target specific individuals, including explicit discussions about Jamal Washington before his arrest. As the evidence mounted, the courtroom atmosphere transformed from shocked silence to murmurs of outrage. Community members in attendance began to recognize cases involving their friends, family members, and neighbors, cases that had never received proper scrutiny under the corrupt local system. While Commander Chen presented the broader conspiracy evidence, Major Rodriguez coordinated with local FBI agents who had arrived to assist with the expanding investigation. Together, they developed a plan to secure evidence at the police department courthouse and district attorney's office before it could be destroyed. Throughout the proceedings, Jamal maintained his composed demeanor. When finally asked to address the court, he spoke with measured clarity. I am grateful that this case has helped expose a system that has harmed many beyond myself. My training prepared me to recognize and document the tactics used against me, but many citizens lack such preparation. This was never about me personally, but about accountability and justice for an entire community. Mrs. Patterson was then invited to provide her testimony, finally able to speak without fear of retribution. The 70-year-old schoolteacher recounted not only her observations of Jamal's arrest, but the pattern of police misconduct she had witnessed over decades in Riverdale. I taught many of these officers when they were children, she noted, with poignant disappointment, including Brian Reynolds. I watched them grow from curious, open-minded children into agents of a system that taught them to fear and control, rather than protect and serve. Kevin Patterson provided technical testimony regarding the digital evidence he had uncovered, explaining in accessible terms how Reynolds and his team had documented their own misconduct through the communications they thought were secure. Following Kevin's testimony, a series of Reynolds' previous victims were allowed to share their experiences, creating a damning pattern of misconduct spanning years. Most powerful was the testimony of Raymond Collins, the former Riverdale officer who had attempted to report Reynolds' cleaners unit years earlier. Now a deputy sheriff in Arizona, Collins had flown in overnight after being contacted by Agent Ramirez. I witnessed Sergeant Reynolds and several other officers forming what they called the Cleaners, an unofficial unit dedicated to what they termed cleaning up certain neighborhoods. In practice, this meant targeted harassment of black residents, planting evidence when convenient, and protecting certain drug operations while aggressively prosecuting their competition. Collins described how his initial reports had been buried by departmental leadership and how he had subsequently faced trumped-up misconduct allegations forcing his resignation. After I reported what I witnessed, I found drugs planted in my locker, was assigned to dangerous calls without backup, and eventually faced termination based on manufactured complaints. As the testimony concluded, Mayor Wilson requested permission to address the court. The visibly shaken mayor acknowledged his own failure to address the corruption more aggressively. I allowed political considerations to override my duty to ensure equal justice for all our citizens. While I did not participate in the conspiracy, my inaction enabled it to continue. I am announcing the formation of an independent commission to review all arrests and prosecutions under Reynolds' involvement with the goal of identifying and remedying wrongful convictions. By early afternoon, the federal takeover of the Riverdale justice system was complete. Military police secured the courthouse while FBI agents executed search warrants at the police department judges' chambers and district attorneys' offices. 17 officers were placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and review of Judge Montgomery's cases was initiated by federal authorities. The most powerful moment came when Jamal, finally freed from all charges, walked down the courthouse steps to find a gathered crowd of community members and fellow service members waiting to show their support. As he emerged, a spontaneous applause broke out, growing into a thunderous ovation. The man who had entered Riverdale 2 weeks earlier as a targeted individual now stood as a catalyst for long overdue justice. 6 months after the dramatic courtroom confrontation, Riverdale had transformed in ways few residents could have imagined. The federal investigation had expanded beyond initial expectations, resulting in 37 indictments across law enforcement, the judiciary, and local government. The old power structure had collapsed entirely, creating space for new leadership committed to equitable justice. On a crisp autumn morning, Jamal Washington stood before the newly established Riverdale Community Oversight Board, his military uniform adorned with the medals earned through 15 years of distinguished service. The board meeting room, once the exclusive domain of entrenched interests, now reflected the diverse community it served. Commander Washington, on behalf of Riverdale and its citizens, please accept this formal apology for the injustice you suffered, announced interim Mayor Gloria Sanchez, the former city council member who had stepped into leadership following Wilson's resignation. Your courage in fighting these false charges exposed corruption that had harmed countless members of our community for decades. Jamal accepted the framed proclamation with characteristic grace. Thank you, Mayor Sanchez. I accept this apology not just for myself, but on behalf of all those who suffered under the previous system, without the resources or platform to fight back effectively. The formal apology represented just one aspect of Riverdale's ongoing reconciliation process. Behind the scenes, the transformation had been comprehensive and far-reaching. Brian Reynolds now faced multiple federal charges, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy against rights, and witness intimidation. His initial bravado had crumbled during FBI interrogations when presented with the overwhelming evidence against him. Facing potentially decades in federal prison, Reynolds had begun cooperating with authorities, providing testimony against his co-conspirators in exchange for sentencing considerations. Judge Montgomery had resigned from the bench and surrendered his law license rather than face disbarment proceedings. The Judicial Review Committee had identified over 200 cases requiring re-examination due to clear patterns of bias. District Attorney Hayes faced both criminal charges and disbarment, his legal career in ruins. Most significant was the impact on those previously convicted through Reynolds' corrupt practices. The review commission established by federal authorities had already overturned 23 convictions, with dozens more under review. Men who had lost years to prison based on fabricated evidence were being released and provided with restitution. For Jamal, the experience had catalyzed a new mission. Using his military leadership experience and newfound public platform, he had established the Service Member Justice Foundation, dedicated to supporting veterans facing legal challenges, particularly those stemming from discrimination, systemic bias. Our men and women in uniform deserve the very rights they risk their lives to defend, Jamal explained to a reporter following the board meeting. This foundation will provide legal resources, advocacy, and support to ensure no service member faces what I experienced in Riverdale. The foundation had already secured substantial funding from military support organizations and private donors, allowing it to take on cases across the country. Mrs. Patterson had emerged as an unexpected community leader through her unwavering testimony and moral authority. The 70-year-old retired teacher now chaired Riverdale's Police Accountability Committee, bringing her educator's perspective to the reform process. For too long, we separated policing from community values, she told the oversight board. True safety comes not from fear and control, but from mutual respect and shared responsibility. Her grandson Kevin had received national recognition for his technical contributions to exposing the corruption. What began as support for his grandmother had revealed his exceptional talents, leading to job offers from federal agencies. He ultimately accepted a position with a Justice Department cyber division specializing in detecting patterns of systemic misconduct in digital communications. Aisha Coleman's legal career had taken a dramatic turn following the Washington case. Appointed by the Justice Department to lead a new civil rights division within the reformed Riverdale Prosecutor's Office, she now worked to ensure that the system served justice rather than perpetuating inequality. This community has shown incredible resilience, Aisha noted during an interview. The transformation we're witnessing isn't just about removing corrupt individuals, but about rebuilding institutions with transparency and accountability at their core. The Riverdale Police Department itself underwent comprehensive restructuring under federal oversight. A new chief recruited from outside the department implemented rigorous training in constitutional policing, implicit bias recognition, and community engagement. Body cameras became mandatory with footage regularly reviewed by the Civilian Oversight Board. Perhaps most telling was the changing atmosphere in Riverdale's neighborhoods. In the 6 months since the federal intervention, community-police relations had begun a slow healing process. Crime rates remained stable, despite predictions of chaos from defenders of the old system, while civilian complaints against officers dropped significantly. On the morning following the Oversight Board meeting, Jamal went for a run through his childhood neighborhood. Unlike his first morning back in Riverdale, when Reynolds had targeted him for simply existing in the wrong neighborhood today, he moved freely, exchanging waves and greetings with neighbors both old and new. Passing Mrs. Patterson's house, he slowed to chat with the elder community leader tending her garden. "Commander Washington," she called, "I was just thinking about you. The Neighborhood Association is meeting next week to discuss the Community Policing Initiative." "Would you consider speaking?" Jamal smiled. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Patterson. Though I should mention I'm not just Commander Washington anymore." He handed her an embossed business card, reading Jamal Washington, Executive Director, Service Member, Justice Foundation. "So you're making it official," she observed with satisfaction. "The foundation will be based here in Riverdale." Jamal nodded. Seemed fitting. This is where the work began, after all. What he didn't share was the complete story behind his return to Riverdale months earlier. Following his run, Jamal met Commander Chen at a quiet cafe downtown. "The oversight board went well?" Chen asked, as they settled at a corner table. "Very well. The reforms seemed genuine, not just cosmetic changes to satisfy federal requirements." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "And the foundation headquarters? Location secured. Finalizing the lease tomorrow. Will be operational within 30 days. Chen smiled slightly. "When we first discussed the possibility of you taking temporary leave to investigate potential targeting of service members in your hometown, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Jamal's return to Riverdale had never been a simple homecoming to help his widowed mother. Based on intelligence suggesting coordinated harassment of minority service members, Naval Special Warfare Command had approved a low-profile investigation. Jamal's family visit provided perfect cover to assess the situation firsthand. "Reynolds took the bait more quickly than we anticipated," Jamal acknowledged. "We expected weeks of surveillance before having enough to move, not an immediate false arrest. Sometimes the most effective operations are those where you allow the adversary to believe they're in control," Chen observed. "Reynolds thought he was demonstrating his power by targeting you. In reality, he was exposing vulnerabilities we could never have identified from outside." As Jamal prepared to leave, Chen posed one final question. "Any regrets about making the foundation your next mission? Your SEAL career had years of potential advancement ahead." Jamal considered this thoughtfully. "The foundation allows me to continue serving, just in a different capacity. The skills transfer surprisingly well, identifying systemic threats, developing strategies to counter them, building networks of support and intelligence. The objective has changed, but the mission remains: protecting those who serve." As Jamal walked through downtown Riverdale, He reflected on the transformation, both personal and communal, of the past 6 months. What began as a targeted operation against specific corrupt officers had revealed a sweeping conspiracy requiring federal intervention. The system designed to protect Reynolds and his allies had ultimately proven its own undoing, collapsing under the weight of its contradictions, once exposed to proper scrutiny. Passing the courthouse, Jamal noted the new accessibility ramp being installed, a small but significant sign of the changing institutional priorities. Where imposing architecture had once been designed to intimidate, renovations now emphasized openness and service. He paused briefly, recalling the chaotic scene in courtroom 3B months earlier. Reynolds' desperate assault, the military police intervention, the systematic dismantling of corruption that followed. The physical confrontation had merely made visible the violence inherent in the system. Reynolds represented a system that had finally faced meaningful accountability. As Jamal continued toward his mother's home, several teenagers recognized him, approaching with excited greetings. Where they might once have avoided eye contact with authority figures, they now engaged confidently, asking about the Foundation's internship opportunities and community programs. This perhaps was the most meaningful measure of change, the restoration of trust between institutions and the communities they served. The transformation of Riverdale remained incomplete, the work of reform ongoing. But in the space created by removing corrupt leadership, a new vision of justice had taken root, one that embraced accountability, community voice, and equal protection under law. The young people walking alongside Jamal represented the true promise of that vision, a generation that might experience authority as protection rather than threat, and institutions that served justice rather than power. What do you think about the changes in Riverdale? Could this story happen in your community? Comment below with your thoughts on police accountability and justice reform. If you believe in the importance of standing up against corruption, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of justice and courage. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that change is possible, even in systems that seem permanently broken. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most shocking confrontations between corruption and justice in recent memory. This powerful story illustrates how systemic racism can corrupt institutions meant to protect all citizens equally. Jamal's experience reveals that justice systems can be weaponized against marginalized communities, particularly when those with authority operate without accountability. It demonstrates how racism becomes institutionalized when left unchecked, creating parallel systems of justice based on race. The story also highlights the critical importance of community solidarity. Mrs. Patterson, Kevin, Aisha, and others each contributed essential pieces to dismantling corruption. No single individual could have succeeded alone. True justice requires collective action. We learn that documentation is power. By meticulously recording evidence of misconduct, Jamal and his allies created an undeniable record that even the most entrenched corruption couldn't dismiss. In an era of technology, this lesson becomes increasingly relevant. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative teaches us that systems can change when confronted with irrefutable evidence and unwavering pressure. Institutions resistant to reform can be transformed when corruption is exposed to sufficient light and accountability mechanisms are properly activated. Finally, it reminds us that the fight for justice is never finished. Riverdale's transformation represents not an endpoint, but a beginning, the start of building truly equitable institutions that serve all community members with dignity and respect. Has your community experienced similar challenges with accountability and law enforcement? What systems exist in your area to ensure justice is applied equally, regardless of race or background? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in the importance of exposing corruption and fighting for justice, please hit that like button to help more people discover this story. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about courage in the face of systemic injustice. This story matters because similar situations are happening across America today. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality of racial discrimination in our justice system, or anyone who might be losing hope that change is possible. Thank you for joining us in bearing witness to both the darkness of corruption and the light of justice that comes through persistence, community, and courage. Remember, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Sometimes we just need to help it bend a little faster,